It's a common sense recap of the big stories. It's Katz and Cosby on 77 WABC.
And joining us now here on the show, we have Professor Alan Dershowitz. Professor, let's get right to it. About Alvin Bragg, did you see that he has decided not to charge a lot of these pro-Hamas protesters that were holed up, that were barricaded in at Columbia University, saying there's not enough evidence? Give me a break. Your thoughts?
Well, first, if he doesn't go after them, we're going to sue them. If any of them hurt anybody, if any of them hit anybody or kidnapped anybody or held anybody hostage, we're going to file civil suits because we cannot trust the district attorney. He's more interested in getting Trump on trumped-up charges, which don't even exist, fake charges, than he is going after people who frighten Jews out of going to class, who block entrance, and who do sometimes physically assault Jews. So, I mean, he has been a terrible, terrible district attorney. And I think we have to do his job for him by suing the people civilly. Heard a Jew, we sue you is our motto. And we're going to go after these people. We now have a list of all the people who he has freed, claiming lack of evidence. We'll see if there's enough evidence to bring a civil suit. I suspect there'll be many cases in which there'll be more than enough evidence to go to a preponderance of the evidence and sue them for whatever they're worth. Take away their car, take away their apartment. If you hurt somebody, you have to pay a consequence. And if the DA won't go after you, we'll go after you as private lawyers.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's like emboldening them if you don't go after them. Bravo to you. We have Governor Doug Burgum has a question, Professor Dershowitz.
Well, I just say, Alan, I'd say the majority of Americans are with you when they say they're not sure there's going to be enough evidence, but we've got it on tape. These people, broke into and occupied a building. I don't know what it required. What was the expense for the city of New York? Hundreds of police that were there to try to clear them out of that building. I mean, I'm sure it had to have broken many of their university conduct rules. These people should be thrown out of school. They should be not having student loans that are federally given or forgiven. And I'm sure everyone's thrilled, Alan, that you're going after them.
Well, I'm thrilled also, Governor, that you're doing such a great job bringing all of these issues to the attention not only of your voters in your great state, but voters around the country. And so I think we all, whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, have to gather together and make sure that these thugs don't get away with it. They are un-American. They hate America. They call for the death to America, the death to Israel. Scratch an anti-Israeli person a little bit, and you're going to find an anti-American person. And so these are people who want to bring down our country. They want to bring down the Judeo-Christian values on which we're based. And we have to fight back. And if the government won't do it through elected DAs funded by George Soros, then we're going to do it through people we're doing it pro bono. But we're doing it to go after these people and make them understand that even if they have the DA on their side, they don't necessarily have the law on their side. And we're going to go after them. And I think it's important that we elect district attorneys who enforce the law fairly. And Bragg has shown us that he's much more interested in making up fake crimes that don't exist against the presidential candidate and imposing a gag order. By the way, who's the victim of the gag order? We're the victim of the gag order because in the debate, we're only going to hear half the debate. We're going to hear President Biden attack Trump saying he's convicted on 34 felonies, and we're not going to be able to hear Trump say, yeah, but do you understand the judge's daughter is a Democrat fundraiser? The jury was picked from among Democratic voters. We have to be able to hear both sides of this issue. That's what the marketplace of ideas is all about. But the gag order prevents us from having our First Amendment right to hear Donald Trump have all of his views expressed.
Yeah. By the way, the gag order, too, it was interesting to hear what Bragg came down with, saying that he's still supporting the gag order in some part. Professor Dershowitz, here's Judge Weinberg.
Alan, good to talk to you again. I'll tell you, I said the other night on this show, I think if the gag order is still in place, I would just disregard it. Now, it's tough for me as a former judge to say disregard the order, but I would say it's prior restraints. I think it's unconstitutional. Trump should be heard, and he should make a point that's unconstitutional at the debate and say whatever he has to say to get his points across so the American people can make an informed judgment. What say you?
That's an interesting point of view. And he says, he would say, I'm not doing it for me. I'm doing it for you. It's your First Amendment rights that are being violated, and I'm not going to stand for that. And so here I'm engaging in an act of civil disobedience. I am violating the gag order. I'm telling you about the jury, how they were selected, the fact that the jury pool came from 90% voting bloc against him, and that he's speaking up on behalf. I'm not going to advocate that because I believe in the law, but I think he ought to take an immediate case up to the United States Supreme Court before the debate and say we want an immediate stay of this gag order so that he can fully participate in the debate on behalf of the American public. I have a piece in tonight's Wall Street Journal which I argue that people like you and me, people who want to hear him, should file an amicus brief in the case and say we have the right to hear him. You're not only depriving Trump of his right to speak, you're depriving us of our right to hear what Trump has to say. And the Supreme Court has said repeatedly that there are two rights under the First Amendment, the right to speak and the right to hear, and both are being violated by this gag order.
Governor Doug Burgum.
Well, I agree with both the judge and with Alan on this, but I think the thing we've seen is the American public has acquitted President Trump, and we saw that immediately after the verdict came out. I mean, this is you look at the May fundraising numbers, you look at the record amount of money that was raised just in the hours afterwards. The fact that President Trump almost doubled what he brought in May versus what Biden did. I mean, this is lawfare. They tried lawfare. Lawfare's not working. Now, and the reason why they went with lawfare is because they can't run on the issues. Because on the issues that mattered all the Americans, President Trump wins. I was just in Michigan all day yesterday. Did a half a dozen events talking with store owners, veterans, people that are small business entrepreneurs, families, retirees, auto workers, all these folks that are there. And guess what? They say, what's the demographic that's supporting Trump? The demographic that's supporting President Trump is everyone who's affected by inflation. Everybody who's affected by high interest rates, everybody who's affected by the open border. You know who that turns out to be? That's Republicans, independents, and Democrats. I mean, Donald Trump's base is everybody who is getting hit by these kitchen table issues, the economy, the open border, the crime in the streets. The cities are less safe, the nation is less prosperous, and the world is at war, because of Joe Biden. And President Trump's winning, and he's winning big, and they can keep trying to do these distractions, and they'll try to do it through the debate. But if Donald Trump, I know he's going to have a strong performance, but he's winning on every issue that matters to voters.
Now, Larry Kudlow was just on the show.
I think Michigan.
And Larry Kudlow was just on the show, and he says that new home sales are down to an all-time low or something.
Yeah, that it's the hardest time ever. I think he said in 40 years for new homeowners to get a home. I mean, that's how many Americans is that?
Well, we see that every state that I've been in, because if you have a home, you can't sell it and trade up to a better home. You can't get a better mortgage. You don't want to give up your low interest rates. So these high interest rates, and now the dramatic increase, 30-40% increase under Joe Biden of what the median home costs, no one can move up. So he's killed the American dream as well as he's killed the economy.
Yeah, Professor Dershowitz, go ahead.
In the governor talking about Michigan, because I think that Biden's making a terrible mistake on Michigan.
Yeah.
He thinks that Michigan will turn on the vote of a couple of thousands or tens of thousands of Muslims and Arabs who believe that he ought to do something to destroy Israel and don't allow Israel to exist. And I think he's making a mistake, because the vast majority, not only of Americans, support Israel, I think the vast majority of people in Michigan support Israel's right to exist. And he shouldn't be mortgaging the future of Israel and the future of America to a small group of people who hate Israel and will do anything to destroy them. And I think he's been doing that, his two-state solution in Michigan and Wisconsin. And I think he is making a mistake politically, and I think in the end, he will lose Pennsylvania over this issue. He will lose Nevada over this issue. He may conceivably win Michigan, but if what you're saying is correct, then he won't even win Michigan, which I think would send a very
your thoughts, Governor.
And President Trump might win Minnesota on the same path. And you're right. I mean, he's playing to the extreme wings of his party. He's playing to the Hamas wing of the Democrat Party on the issue you've tried about. He's playing to the climate extremist wing with EV vehicles, which is destroying jobs. You may have the union leaders vote for Biden, but the union workers are all going to be voting for President Trump. They know who cares about the worker in America, and that's President Trump.
Do you believe that also, is Professor Dershowitz is saying that it's such a slim amount that he's coddling to the case of where it's not even going to help?
Well, certainly he is, and it's always smaller than you think because these guys are professionals. When they're on these campuses and they had front page news for 6 weeks on on all the campus protests, they weren't all students. These are paid protesters. I mean, the best way to try to capture an issue these days is hire protesters, put them in a spot, like a media market like New York, Columbia, George Washington, get all the cameras there, and then somebody thinks, and apparently someone on Biden's team thinks that that's how America feels. That's not how America feels. That's a few paid protesters that grabbed headlines for 6 weeks.
Yeah, what's amazing, Professor Dershowitz, and I'm curious.
I think it's, yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, it was amazing, and I'm curious both of your thoughts on this. There was this moment that to me encapsulates sort of what's been happening here. It was about a week ago, and Joe Biden was at an event, and a protester, it was a female protester who interrupted him. And she said, "Genocide Joe, Genocide Joe." And you could see the Secret Service was trying to move her on. He stops and said, "She has a point." I mean, when you hear that, Professor Dershowitz, and I can't wait to get your reaction, Doug Burgum, in the studio with us. Professor Dershowitz, your reaction. I mean, to me, how could you got the President of the United States agreeing with her?
Yeah, he's pandering to Hamas, and he did the same thing with AOC. He said, "I've learned you have to listen to that lady." No, you don't. You have to vote against her, and you have to make sure that she doesn't take over the Democratic Party. The reason so many of us are worrying and wondering if we can remain Democrats are AOC and President Biden pandering to a woman who was falsely accusing Israel instead of acting in self-defense of genocide. Do they even understand the meaning of the word genocide? Genocide means trying to kill people just because of their race, what happened in the Second World War. When you call Israel or anyone else today genocidal, you're basically a Holocaust denier. You're basically saying, God, if that's all that happened to the Jews in Germany, they were subject to self-defense and a little bit of hunger, not starvation. My God, you can't make comparisons. You can't use the word genocide to describe the nation state of the Jewish people fighting for its own survival by acting in self-defense and engaging proportionality. And to the extent that any Democrat does that, I can understand why people are leaving the Democratic Party and saying, we just can't support that kind of stuff anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. And Doug Burgum, your reaction, too.
Well, it's horrific what he said, Rita, what you're talking about when he said she's got a point. But it shows up in his foreign policy. I mean, when we're talking about these negotiations, he hasn't at all through this whole thing ever negotiated for Israel. If you were the United States negotiating for Israel, the President of the United States, you would say, release all the hostages, then we'll have a ceasefire. That's what you'd say. You would put a demand out, release the American hostages, release the Israeli hostages, release all the hostages, and then we'll talk. And he's never said that. But what he has said is he's put conditions on Israel that are exact conditions that Hamas would want to have. So he's basically sitting at the negotiating table, negotiating for the terrorists, as opposed to negotiating for our ally, our strongest ally in the Middle East.
Absolutely. Well, Professor Dershowitz.
It's so important that this comes from,
Yeah, go ahead. Final thoughts. Go ahead, please.
The governor of a state that comes from the governor of a state that has a very tiny Jewish population. It shows that this is an American issue. This is an issue that all Americans care about, that Israel is our most important ally in the Middle East, and being anti-Israel is being anti-American. And it's so important that I really want to thank the governor for standing up for Israel and for standing up for American values.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Professor Dershowitz, wow, thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Dershowitz. And we're going to have to take a break right now, and we'll catch up with you again real soon.
Long Island is more exciting than ever at Jake's 58 Casino Hotel. Get ready to zoom into some serious cash with Zoom Ball every Wednesday in June. Win up to $500,000. 1 point equals 1 entry. 2 lucky winners will be drawn at the top of every hour from 1 to 5 p.m. to play Zoom Ball. Discover the excitement at Jake's 58 Casino Hotel.
If gambling is a problem for you or someone, please call the 24-hour toll-free helpline at 877-8-HOPE or text NY.